Since Super Bowl Sunday is just around the corner, we're in the kitchen today. And the big question we'll tackle is whether this event can be both tasty and healthy. But given that Super Bowl eating is all about snacks, this leaves us with one major challenge. How can we make snacks that are healthy for our Super Bowl party? You will be walking away from this video knowing exactly the kind of snacks to make for your Super Bowl party so you can enjoy the game and leave the guilt behind. And make sure to stay tuned until the end, where we are going to make my favorite snack for any party or event with a little hands-on tutorial. Hey there, I'm Dr. Anna. I'm a medical doctor who was trained in Italy, and on this channel, you're gonna learn how to master your health with the Mediterranean diet. All right, let's start by recapping what makes a snack healthy. And to do this, we're going to pull the framework from the healthiest diet known, and this is the Mediterranean diet. It's backed by tons of research, and it stands the test of time. So when it comes to making a healthy snack, I like to approach this with the same frame of mind as we would making any healthy balanced meal. Now, according to the Mediterranean diet, we want to incorporate lots of healthy foods, often that are plant-based, and this will ensure us that we're eating really nutrient-dense foods with lots of vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients, which are different molecules found in plants that can provide lots of anti-inflammatory or anti-cancer properties. Plus, these nutrient-dense foods will give us a really healthy source of all of our macronutrients, and these are our carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. And now for a snack to be healthy, I like to approach this with the same framework for what would make any meal healthy, and that is to include a nice balance of what I like to call the healthy trifecta. So that is including enough fiber, healthy fat, and protein every time you eat. And this is true also of snacks. Now, the healthy trifecta is important for a couple of reasons. The first is that it helps slow down our digestion, which is extremely important for our ability to extract the nutrients from food and get all the health benefits. But not only that, it's important for us to have a steady increase and then decrease in our blood sugar following eating. And that's very important for our metabolic health and some metabolic conditions like type 2 diabetes, obesity, heart disease, and other obesity-related conditions. And beyond the clinical implications of eating foods that slow down our digestion, if we do this, it's just going to make us feel a lot better. And what that's going to do is provide us a good, sustainable source of energy for many hours after a meal. And that's especially important during our Super Bowl party because we definitely want to make sure we're still awake after the Super Bowl halftime show. So in order for us to approach creating the healthiest and tastiest treats for our Super Bowl party, we want to make sure we hit on foods that provide us the healthy sources of fiber, fat, and protein. And like anything in the Mediterranean diet, the best way to do this is by incorporating whole foods. That is, foods that come directly from nature. Now, before we dive into our hands-on tutorial, please subscribe to this channel because it helps get this content out to more people who really need it. Okay, so let's talk about what we're gonna make today. This is something that Italians like to call Pinzimonio, and it's a typical thing that you're going to eat in large gatherings that are very social, where lots of people are sitting around, talking, being together. But I learned this from living in Italy for 6 years. Now, in other cultures, this can be called crudité platter, like from French. So in the US, we do have different variations of this, and it is one of the tastiest and most versatile things that you can provide at a party. What's great is that it's providing lots of healthy vegetables, delicious dips, and the flavor profiles can be very wide ranging. So if you're somebody who likes spicy things or very savory things or sweet things, you can change up whatever dip you're going to use. Ultimately, it breaks down into having some type of a vegetable of your choosing. We're going to chop it into long, slender pieces so that it's very easily dipped in whatever dip you choose. And because I'm very health conscious and health focused on this channel with you guys, I want to emphasize having a dip that is a good source of protein. The classical thing that people think of when it comes to a crudité platter is dipping vegetables in hummus. And so to provide a little variety, I decided instead of hummus today, we're going to make a whipped ricotta dish. I'm going to do this in 2 different variations, one that's more savory and one that's sweet. So you can choose which one you like, and if you have a lot of people at your Super Bowl party, maybe making both is a great choice. Now, before we start chopping, I like to put this caveat out there. You do not actually have to use ricotta to make this recipe. You could use Greek yogurt, and I definitely suggest using a low-fat or a non-fat plain Greek yogurt because that's going to have the highest amount of protein and no added sugar. But if you're a non-dairy eater, you can use a tofu to make a sort of tofu whip, and the tofu type that tends to whip the best is something called silken tofu. Okay, so to make pinzimonio, you need to choose vegetables of your preference. And for this today, I have some bell pepper, I have some rainbow carrots, and to change it up, instead of something typical like cucumber, I decided to go with radicchio. It's very Italian and it's super tasty. Now, when it comes to choosing something like a bell pepper, the shape is really important because the goal is that we're going to make long, slender pieces. So you'll notice these two bell peppers are rather thin and long. Sometimes bell peppers are very round and short. So you want to go for a variety where they're long and slender to make strips really easy. So the first part is just to, if you have a really long carrot, you want to cut it in half first. And then we're going to cut the rest in longitudinal pieces. Now, if you've never cut a purple carrot before, you are in for a real treat because do you see how beautiful this is? It has such an amazing look to it. Purple carrots are always multicolored on the inside. Very nice to have at a party. So you kind of cut them and make as long and slender of pieces as you can. Depending on how thick your carrot is, you might have to really cut it down. The goal is to really cut your carrots so that they're in long, slender pieces. And the beautiful thing about doing pinzimonio is that they don't need to look perfect. So the beautiful thing is that you can design your little cups of the pinzimonio, whatever you want, so that people can easily pick them up later for dipping. All right, something that I like to do when I'm chopping vegetables is have a little scrap dish right next to me so I don't start creating a big mess. And if your kitchen is designed like mine, I have the island in the center of the room. The trash can is behind me under the cabinet, so I don't have easy access to be throwing out some of the vegetable scraps as I go. This just keeps things really clean and organized and makes the cleanup process later very easy. So the goal is to make thin strips that are going to be very easy to dip into something liquidy later. And we want to design it so that there's just kind of hanging out, ready to be picked up. What's so great about bell peppers is, as you can see, they hook so perfectly on the side of a glass that makes it really easy for grabbing in a group setting. Now let's have some real talk for a second. The Super Bowl is a very American tradition, and part of the American tradition of the Super Bowl is to eat very rich foods and party snacks like chicken poppers, buffalo chicken dip. Sometimes people have pigs in a blanket, very meaty, very heavy, very rich food. Now, I am all for celebrating with food and eating things that are appropriate for a specific occasion, especially if that only happens a few times a year or even just once a year. So by no means am I saying that you can't have any of those types of classic snacks at your Super Bowl party. But if you are overall trying to take care of your health, reclaim your health, and get your diet in order, I would argue that those are not the kinds of things you want to be serving if you can control it. Now, the truth is, some people are going to gravitate towards the chips and the guac, but having a variety of healthy foods at your party is going to provide you at least the opportunity to get some nutrition in. Okay, so now we have our beautiful cup of bell pepper. Okay, so now for our radicchio. The thing that's very important about cutting this into dippable strips is to keep the root intact at the bottom. You don't want to cut this horizontally because everything's just going to fall apart like lettuce. Instead, we're going to cut it longitudinally through the root so that it all stays intact at the bottom. You'll see what I mean in a second. So first I'm just going to cut through this the long way. Now what you can see from this so clearly is how the root at the bottom keeps the whole rest of the vegetable completely intact. If I cut it this way, I lose the base of the vegetable and everything's going to be a big loose piece of radicchio. Instead, I'm going to keep this part intact. And everything is going to be connected at the bottom, so you can grab it from the bottom portion and easily dip it into something. Now, normally I would say you'd want to cut this flipped over flat so that it can't roll around and you're completely safe with your chopping. But just for the sake of showing you guys what I mean, we want to keep this intact. I'm actually just going to hold this from the side and cut through the middle so you can see the root is still intact. Now, some pieces are just going to fall off, and that is not the end of the world, so we can leave that to the side. But as you cut through, you're going to have this beautiful wedge that stays together. Now, some pieces are just going to start to fall off, and that is okay. Don't throw them out, save them. That's going to be amazing in a salad tomorrow. But now we have this perfect little wedge, and we add that into our Pinzimonio glass. Now, the ticket with radicchio is that the root at the bottom is not really that wide. So you have to realize it's going to start to come apart a little bit. Leave it together because easily you could just pick this up and dip it. But if some people are going to have trouble with that, just pay attention. Now, alternatively, if you don't like radicchio, you can use iceberg lettuce. Any kind of a lettuce that has a really strong root base is going to work perfectly in this way. Okay, so we've chopped all of our vegetables. We're ready to make our whipped ricotta. And for this, I'm just going to be using a whisk to do it by hand because it's going to get it a little bit active and, you know, a little bit of an arm workout in there. But for sure, you are welcome to use an electric mixer. You could even use a blender if you have one of those. So as I mentioned, I'm going to be making two different recipes. They're very simple. You can pretty much just flavor up your ricotta with whatever you want. One that's more savory, that's going to be olive oil, lemon, garlic, and green onion. And then another one that's sweet. I am still going to add a little bit of olive oil to give it more umami flavor, but then it's going to have honey and mixed fresh herbs. So let's get started. The first thing I want to do, I'm going to cut my lemons. Part of this is just so I can smell the fresh lemon because I love it so much. Now, what you could do, if you're going to be preparing this many hours in advance of your party, squeezing some of the lemon on your vegetables is going to help keep them crisp. And that acid will actually help decrease the amount of oxidization that's going to happen to your vegetables, so preventing some of the browning. So that's always a nice little trick you can do. Now, what I want to do with my lemon is I'm going to cut it horizontally because the root is here, but I'm going to be using one of these hand juicers that you literally twist on top of it. And for that to work really well, you want to be able to fit that inside. Now I'm going to cut this in half and see how the center of the lemon is just perfectly round. That fits very well on top of my little juicer here. So I can knock out some of the seeds, but the seeds are going to get stuck inside of these grooves anyway, so we're okay with that. So I'm going to put it on top. And the way this works, this is very old school. You just kind of press, you squeeze together and twist in a circle. A lot of people have those hand clamp juicers now, or you can use an electric juicer. But I like to get my arms into the work of whatever I'm making in the kitchen because it keeps me active. All right, so you can see that all that juice is actually collected in the rim here. And from the inside, it's pretty much empty. There's probably still a little bit more I can get and really squeeze down. And if you want to get the sort of perimeter towards the center of the juicer, you're really going to push out the last bits of that lemon juice. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to set this to the side just for a second. I've already peeled my garlic, so now I cut off the ends in the back, and I'm going to just chop them down and mince them. Garlic can be kind of tricky to cut. If you don't have a really sharp knife, it can be actually very dangerous, so the sharper the knife, the better. You can always make it turned. Now, I'm not a chef, so my knife skills might not be as good as yours, and that's okay. It's still going to be nutritious and very tasty. So now we're going to just mince this down. If you were in the room with me right now, you would be smelling the fresh garlic, and it is absolutely divine. So I'm going to just leave this sitting here on the cutting board. All right, now I'm going to chop some of this green onion here and some of those pieces. Now, the oniony flavor can be very pungent for some people of green onion. So you can put less or more of this inside of your ricotta, but I'm telling you, it is so tasty. If you love the allium vegetables, onion, garlic, this is just absolutely divine. Wonderful. Okay, look at that. Now, some folks do have trouble digesting raw garlic, so if you are one of those people, definitely skip it. You could even just put garlic powder inside instead of fresh, but I always like fresh because I think the flavors are so much stronger and more pungent. Plus, a lot of the health benefits are going to come from whole clove garlic rather than a garlic powder. We're ready to whip up our ricotta. And for this, I'm using a part-skim ricotta. Now, a lot of recipes online are going to call for a whole milk ricotta. Here's the thing. Whole milk ricotta is going to taste very, very good, and it's going to be creamy, and it's going to have a little bit more of that rich flavor. But given that the fat that comes in milk is one of our primary sources of saturated fat in our diet, and this type of saturated fat is linked to some negative health effects, like a higher risk of cardiovascular disease, I like to try to cut down on that kind of fat in my diet as much as I can. But I recognize that flavor and mouthfeel, the creaminess, is extremely important when it comes to choosing foods that you want to eat with your friends or your family at your Super Bowl party. So for that reason, I'm actually going to be adding back in a little bit of olive oil. That adds the creaminess to this, and we know with olive oil, we're adding back in a lot of very healthy fats. These are mostly our polyunsaturated and our monounsaturated fatty acids, which are actually linked to decreased risks of things like heart disease. So you choose what you like best, but I'm just simply reminding you that you have some opportunity in your diet to increase the nutritional profile of a simple recipe like making a whipped ricotta. Okay, so for this, because this is just a dip, you don't actually have to measure the quantity of it. We're not baking this. It doesn't need to be an exact proportion of ricotta to the flavorings. Everything is to taste. So I am simply going to lop a big amount of this into my dish. And what I'm going to do is start by just hand whisking the ricotta together. It's gonna start aerating and it lightens up. I mean, if you can see this, it's already getting fluffy like marshmallow, and I've been doing this for 5 seconds. So if you're someone who feels like you don't have a lot of time, this is something you can literally whip together very quickly. Pun intended. And what we're going to do first is add in our liquid. So I have my lemon juice here. That was the juice of half a lemon. That's the proportion I'm putting in this one. But if you're someone who loves lemon, feel free to put the juice of an entire lemon inside. So be careful when you start whipping it that it doesn't splash out. Wonderful. This actually looks amazing. Okay, now we're gonna add in a little bit of salt. Now, a lot of folks need to be measuring the amount of salt that they're adding to their diet because they're watching their sodium. That is fine. And at the same time, what I've learned from cooking with family members of some of my Italian friends is that a lot of traditional recipes, when it comes to things like salt and pepper, you're just kind of eyeballing it. So I have some Himalayan pink salt that I'm just gonna kind of crack in to get a little bit of that, not too much. I'll mix it together, I'll taste it, and then decide if I need more. Now, a lot of folks love black pepper, and I do recommend you can crack some in, but if you're going for black pepper, try to grind it fresh from the whole kernel. So this kind of a grinder is perfect because the kernels are inside. Now, the flavors inside the black pepper are aromatic and they can go rancid. So buying pre-ground black pepper, you're not going to have as much of the nutritional benefit, and the flavor is going to be way more mild than if you're cracking it fresh. So now we've added our lemon juice, we've added our salt, and I'm now going to add some olive oil. I'm going to be putting a tablespoon of olive oil into this, and then at the end I'm going to drizzle a little bit more olive oil as a finishing touch right before serving it. As you can see, I've added some more liquid into this, so it's getting really creamy. So let's add our garlic and about half of the green onion. We've mixed all of that together and we're ready to serve it into our dish. All right, so when you put it into your serving dish, you wanna just set it in the bowl, whichever one you're going to use. So we're gonna just drizzle a little bit of olive oil just for the look over the top, and then add a little bit more of our green onion as a garnish. We're ready to try our savory Pinzimonio. Let's see how it is. All right, we're gonna wrap up with our sweet variety of whipped ricotta. And this one is really simple, even simpler than the other one. It's just ricotta, and I've already put it in our bowl for us. And I'm gonna add some honey and some fresh herbs. And I'm using a combination of rosemary, some thyme, and some sage. Now, if you want just one instead of all three, that's totally fine, but I'm feeling adventurous today. So the first thing is we're going to de-stem the herbs. Now, if you have an herb garden, that is the best way to have herbs. I am not the best with plants, so I bought my herbs in the grocery store today. Also perfectly okay. As soon as you start ripping them apart, they're going to have just so much flavor. You can smell all of the aromas. They are leaping off of the table. Okay, so I'm gonna de-stem all of these herbs. The best thing is with thyme, they have such little leaves and we can easily just pull them off the stem from the end. If they're growing up, you wanna pull them backwards and they just come right off. Now, some of you might be wondering if you can use dried herbs for this. You totally can. You don't need to use fresh, but I'm telling you, it is a completely different dish when you use fresh herbs. They smell so strong compared to dried. And because they're just going to go raw into this whipped ricotta, I'm not cooking them, you do run the risk of having something kind of papery feeling in your mouth if you get too much dried herb in one bite. So I'm de-spining my herbs and I'm just creating a little pile of mixed herbs. And we have our thyme here that just so beautifully falls off of its spine. See how that works? Here, let's take this long sprig. Here's the end. And if I pull it backwards, they literally just fall right off. More or less. And you can do this as much or as little as you want. So if you just want a little bit of herb, like just a hint, that's fine. You can put a little bit. If you want a really bursting flavor of herbs in your whipped ricotta, then I recommend putting a lot in. In my opinion, you really can't overdo it when it comes to adding fresh, tasty herbs to your cooking. And this is one of the principles of the Mediterranean diet. Having things like aromatic herbs and spices really helps add amazing layers of flavor to whatever you're cooking, and it keeps it interesting. Plus, it'll probably prevent you from reaching for something like ketchup or mustard or barbecue sauce to add flavoring to what you're eating. And often a lot of those things are adding lots of added sugar or oils, and they're sitting on the shelf for a long time. And so one of the principles of the Mediterranean diet is to use very fresh ingredients, things that come directly from nature as much as possible. Add a little bit more rosemary, rosmarino in Italian. Now the goal is to have really tiny little pieces of herbs, so I'm going to actually be chopping these down with my chef's knife. All of those aromatic oils inside are just leaping off the table. This room smells incredible. If you've never chopped fresh herbs, I urge you to try this as soon as possible. This weekend before the Super Bowl starts. Okay, we have our beautiful herbs. Now you could use mint, you could use basil. I mean, any herbs that you want literally would be amazing for this. First, I'm just going to whip my ricotta, aerate it as much as possible. Now, the nice thing about using ricotta, like I mentioned before, it's adding a little bit of protein. So I prefer to use protein-rich dips rather than just fat-rich dips. So this is going to have both fat and protein. So the closer we can get to the healthy trifecta, the better we're doing. And if you recall, the third component of the healthy trifecta is fiber. And that's why we're dipping vegetables in, which is one of the best sources of fiber for our diet. Now we have our whipped ricotta. I'm going to add a spoon of honey to this. Wow. You can use any honey you want. Wildflower is what I have today. Okay, so I've whipped my ricotta. Now I'm going to add most of my herbs into it, but I'm going to save a little bit for the end so that right when we serve it, we can put the last of that fresh herb right on top and it makes it look very presentable. We're ready to serve it. I'm going to collect the whipped ricotta into my serving bowl. Depending on the number of people at your party, you may want to have a smaller or a larger serving dish than I am using. And again, did I measure any of the herbs or any of the ricotta or any of this honey? I actually didn't. And that's because this is just a dip. The whole concept of a dip is you're not really watching how much you're eating, you're just kind of going for it. And if you're watching the Super Bowl, your eyes are probably on the TV and not the food that's in front of you. And that's the reason we're trying to make this snack as healthy as possible so we don't really have to stress about eating too much of the wrong thing. Instead, we'll probably be eating too much of the right thing. Okay, so I have it in my dish. Now what I'm gonna do is just add a little bit of honey as a sort of decorative drizzle on top. I'm going to put the last of our fresh herbs right on top here, so they beautifully just sit on top so that when we're ready to take a little taste of our sweetened dip. Now, if you don't want to dip something like a vegetable in a sweetened ricotta dip, feel free to add fruit. But again, the goal is to keep this snack as healthy as possible, and you really can't overdo it on vegetables. Plus, something like a carrot stick or a bell pepper already has a sort of sweet flavor to it, and I think it goes together really well. Fabulous. All right, there you have it. That is your healthy Pinzimonio for your Super Bowl day extravaganza. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you're interested in having a lot more healthy snacks in your life, I recommend checking out this video here where I go over tons of Mediterranean diet snack ideas. Jump into that video and I'll see you in there.